Hey, we're back on the air after being gone for so long. Last year I decided to discontinue the monthly format, and I've gone to more of kind of an update format instead. So this being the very first video for the year, this would be update number 1. I'm going to try to review some of the events that have taken place thus far this year. Went to a couple of the NMRA conventions. Had a good time with that. Got some new toys to talk about. I got a 3D printer. Ooh, been learning about that with some of the 3D software, so we'll cover some of that. Also, some of the projects that we're working on. My Union Station project has moved along quite a bit, and I'll try to cover what we do with that. I've made quite a few things with 3D printer that are kind of fun to play with here. See if I got something here I can show you. It's sort of in the works, but one of the little backdrop buildings that I've been making for the Union Station project. So I'll show you how I get a little better light on that. I'll show you how I made these. Try briefly. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with it because there's all kinds of different printers out there and different programs and so forth, so don't really know what people have that they're working with. But it's been a while since I've been on the air, so we'll start off from here and try to show you what I've been doing. And thus began the new year. In 2017, I made a video about adding lights to the layout. I've learned quite a few new things since then. I used battery packs back then. Are you kidding? If that wasn't bad enough, I had a really bad way of making connections under the board. And then I used these enormous plugs that were really hard to work with. And so I got under the table and I took out all that ugly old wiry stuff. Oh, what a battle. Ooh, get off me. Ooh, get away from me. Ooh, ooh, goodness. Oh my gosh. Oh, what a monster. Ooh. Oh, down boy. Ooh, yikes. Okay, here's what I've been doing for my lights. This is a chain of little fairy lights, little LEDs that I got, and I'll show you where I can get those later in the video. But as you see, these little LEDs are about 3 inches apart on this little string, and that's just great for the lights that I need. I'll just snip these off as I need them, and they've got a nice long lead on them. And that allows me to thread them down through a 16th inch piece of aluminum tubing. And I paint the top of the LED here just to keep it from shining through the top. At the bottom, I've got a little soldered connection and a little bit of shrink tube there to protect it. And then add on some little leads. Now these leads, I've got little pins soldered onto those with a little shrink tubing, so they'd be like little plugs. Now those I made from these guys. You've seen these before, these little male connector pins. And what I did is just take a little pair of needle nose, and you can pull these pins right out of this plastic strip here. So I've got these separate little pins, and that's what's soldered on to the bottom here. Now I did that because when I get these on the layout, I can thread them through the existing holes a little easier. I don't have to drill a larger hole. I can put these into a little piece of tubing, little straw or whatever, and thread them right through the existing hole. So that's why I didn't keep them together. Otherwise, if I want to make a little plug, I can just snip these apart. That one took off. I'll try this again. There we go. I can snip them apart. And I got a little plug. I can use that for some of the buildings that I've got that have already got kind of a large hole. This will fit through a 1/4 inch hole on the layout. so I can make these little plugs. Now I do that to make some little junction boxes, and I'll show you those in just a minute here. These little guys you can buy in any number of configurations. This one's a 2x4, but you can get them, 2x2 or 2x3, 6, 8, 10. So I've been buying these little fellas, and I make little junction boxes with them. Now with these little breakouts here, these little plugs, I'll solder one onto the end of a pair of leads here and solder those right through the leads on the little box. And on the other end, I've got another little female plug that I use. This one's just a 2-pole plug, but these are very handy for making these little junction boxes. So I get my little pins together, my little plug, and a couple pieces of wire, and solder them together like so, and then I glue on a piece of styrene, and I use this to put a screw through that and screw it onto the bottom of the layout. So these little junction boxes have been real handy. Here's one that's a little bigger. This one's I think got about 10 poles to it. And here's another little one. This one I just made by gluing together 2 of these to make just a real small one. So it's 2 of these that are glued together just to make a real small junction box. And now that allows me, once I've thread these leads back through the board of the layout, I can just plug those right in, and there's my connection. And from there I've made little cables that run between the junction boxes from the power source, and I just measure out whatever length I need, and these just plug right in, as long as I mind my polarity, make sure I keep the polarity correct. Actually that would go this way for the way I've got it plugged in. So I just gotta be careful with the polarity and plug in a cable, and if I want to run off down another direction here, I've got another cable. I actually used a different kind here, little 90-degree pins here. So just on occasion I'll use those if I need to make a quick turn, and that can just plug right in to the end here, and off I go in a different direction with another cable. Or if I desire, I can actually plug the cable right into the junction box and run off in a different direction. So this is a really handy way to make my light connections under the table. It's easy to maintain, it's easy to expand. I just put in a junction box wherever I need one and run little cables between them. Sometimes I'll make kind of little lighter cables. This one's made from lighter wire, and it's all it is just those little pins that I cut from the strip and solder them together, a little bit of shrink tubing on them, and they're really handy. So I really like the way this little system works, where I can just plug it in from any direction I want to go to. If I want to go off in a different direction or plug in more lights, if I've got buildings and things so forth nearby, I can plug those into a junction box. So it's very handy for me. I really enjoy this system. It's a lot better than what I was doing. It was a mess, but this way I can keep all my wiring in good shape. And here's a look at the connections underneath the board here. You can see it's much cleaner than the old stuff. And above board, there's look at all the stuff that was happening here, all the buildings that I had to take out and redo, all the lights and things. Oh man, the Public Utilities Department has been busy restoring all the electrical grid. But eventually, we'll get there. And there's what's his name lying down on the job again. Another little project I did, one of these little buildings, I decided to try to make it look like a little welding shop. Just used a simple little Arduino sketch and mounted in a few little LEDs, some code to make the LEDs kind of flicker in a random fashion. And fun little project, but the trouble with this is that when the lights are on in the room, the effect is a little dim and it's hard to see it. So I might have to revisit this project, put some bigger, maybe brighter LEDs in there so the effect shows up a little better and under normal room light. But it was a fun little project, so I'll have to revisit this and try to make it a little better. And in February, I came with a bit of sad news. My good friend Gary, he's there in the middle working on his layout. We lost our good friend Gary in February. Gary was very well known in the local model railroad community. We often met on Sunday mornings. A group of fellow model railroaders met on every Sunday morning. I often had a good time just shooting the breeze, enjoying his deck on the outside. He also had a good spread of goodies for us every time we came, so he's a very generous man, very kind man. He had a big layout that we were working hard to kind of restore and so forth, but unfortunately now I think that layout's going to be dismantled. So I miss my good friend Gary and all the camaraderie that came with the visits to his house. And his dogs, once in a while, would present me with a shoe. That was always a great honor to be presented with a shoe whenever I arrived. His dogs were wonderful. I miss them too. And another good friend of mine has a big layout. He's one of the members of Gary's Sunday morning group. Big N-scale layout. We're working on that, trying to get some work done on that, get that up and running. He's got a lot of work to do. It's a big, big layout. Another member of Gary's group, Ed Romo, has an incredible, beautiful layout that was featured in the 2017 Great Model Railroads magazine. So you'll have to check that out if you can find a copy of that. Just a beautiful, beautiful layout. Ed is a retired architect and he builds all his structures. And if you think that layout's something, just wait till you get a load of the big layout he's got in the adjacent room. All these buildings Ed made himself, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful layout. I'm going to check it out. So his layout is one of the layouts featured in the tours for the Thousand Lakes NMRA convention, layout tours in the area. Ed was featured here. So a beautiful layout. There's Ed in the middle there. Gorgeous layout. Well, in March, I was invited back to the Modelers Retreat in Plymouth, Minnesota, and all kinds of fantastic models featured there. Wonderful models, just a beautiful display of all kinds of things, trains and modules and small layouts. Just incredible amount of skill and talent in this group of modelers. Just wonderful stuff to see. Big modular layout, all kinds of really incredible stuff. Okay, this is a look at TurboCAD 2022 Deluxe 64-bit. This is the software that I used to create my 3D models. Now, don't get all excited here. I'm not planning right now to make a 3D model of the Union Station. I just used that plan, that design, to try to figure out how to use the 3D software. And give you a little tour here on the thing here. It turned out that this wasn't really suited, or this particular approach didn't really suit me for the 3D printing I wanted to do. My thinking was, well, let's make a 3D rendering and we'll go from there and do some prints and so forth. But this didn't really suit my needs here. I'll give you a little different rendering of it here. Kind of fill it in there. There you go. See it a little better. So that's as far as I got, just making a 3D rendering of the station, and it was a good learning tool to try to figure out the software and what I can do with it. Um, but again, it wasn't quite what I needed to do. I was making this a little more complicated than I needed to, and what I ended up doing was really a lot simpler than trying to do a full 3D rendering of the building and then try to do some printing from there. So I'll show you real quickly what I ended up doing with the software here instead. Okay, here is another example of a drawing that I did for my little 5 and dime building. That's one of the backdrop buildings. And we'll switch here to an isometric view. And the drawing, if you can, we'll zoom in a little bit till the grid appears here. Now the grid, if you can imagine, is the tabletop. And the drawing is flat on the grid. It's not a floor plan where you draw a plan and then build the walls on top of the plan. This is, if you can imagine, all lying flat. I've taken a vertical wall and I've laid it down flat on the grid, and that's how I did the drawing. Now each of these little components here is just a box. Click on that and it's a box. I didn't try to draw a plan and then try to fit in all the windows and doors and so forth. Each of these little elements, even the window frames here, is just a box. That's all it is. So you just draw one box after another, different sizes and different thickness. I think the window frames, I made those to be 4 inches thick, and here's a wall that is 12 inches thick, and then I added more detail, came around here, added some of the details. That one's 15 inches thick. I just kind of throw them on top of each other and come up with a little design that way. And all the elements here is just one box after another. Here's a box for the window frame. Here's a box for the wall under the window. Here's a box up here. Even the door frames, all the frames are just one little box after another is all I do for making these drawings. Let's go back to the plan view here, and when it comes time to printing, all I need to do is say print this section, which is the storefront. Again, you can see all the individual pieces here, all the little pink lines here are highlighting all of this individual little boxes to make this little storefront wall. So I'll print that, and then the next piece was kind of a 2-piece or 2-floor section here, and print this piece, and that is just replicated about, I don't know, 5-6 times to make my building as tall as I want it. And then near the top on this little piece, I'll print this piece, and this has got a little different look to it. You can see some of the detail here. Move it a little bit here and you can see the cornice up there. You got a little bit of different detail on the top, and so really all I did was just replicate my wall several times, and really only had 3 different pieces I needed to design: the storefront, the intermediate floors, and the top. And I got my building. Now I'm going to show you one little other thing I need to pay attention to. If you're familiar with 3D filament printers, they rely on everything kind of being on a flat surface, and if I didn't keep all these elements on the same flat surface, you can see everything's all flat, all right along the edge there. There's nothing below the grid there. However, let's make the little change here. Let's just goof this up a bit, and if I make that, let's say this was in the wrong place, you can see it's dropped below the grid here, and now I've got a piece that's not in line with the rest of the building. That is going to mess up my printing, because if you try to print this, 3D printer is going to try to print that little box first, and then it's going to, by the time it moves up to the next couple layers, it's going to try to print this whole thing, and there won't be anything underneath it to support it, so it's not going to work very well. So that's the only thing I need to really be careful with, is to make sure all my elements are on a flat plane. As long as I keep that in order, then there's really nothing to it but to make a bunch of boxes and make my building. So it's kind of like a design preservation model, where if you wanted to build a whole building, you could do 4 different walls this way and stick them together, and you'd have your building. So that's just a real quick and dirty demonstration of what I do to create these 3D models. Now here is that little building I just showed you on the computer. I've painted this. I'm in the middle of painting it. I haven't quite finished everything. I've started painting the window frames here. So this is the little building, my little 5 and dime building, and you see how it turned out. Now the storefront section was printed just this little bit to begin with, and then I printed the floors, just kind of replicated each one. I didn't have to draw each one, I just printed each one a little separately. So I've got several little floors all the way up and then up to the top. You can see the top, the little cornice detail on the top. This little piece up here, that was a separate design. So, and on the back I've put some balsa strips here, balsa sticks, to kind of give the thing a little support and rigidity. Now when I glued these pieces together, the filament is not like plastic glue. I thought it would be some plastic glue would put these pieces together, but what I ended up using was really some super glue between the joints here. It's hard to see the joints, but right there and there. I had to kind of super glue them together because the resin or the filament, whatever this stuff is made of, is not compatible with plastic cement that you might use with styrene. So I ended up using super glue to stick them all together. Now you might have also noticed on the drawing I had a little separate 5 and dime down here. This I left open here, and I can put the sign right in that opening. And my thinking is that if this is a little translucent, I can put a light back here and I end up with kind of a lighted sign. So that's my plan there, is to come up with a sign for that. Also, here before I move on here, the same idea on this building, where I've got made an opening in the building, and here's my sign. Now, other things I'm learning about the printer, when I painted these little letters, you can't really see it here, but the paint kind of seeped down inside the sign itself. So there was some bleeding going on between the paint and the sign. So if I can show this at all here, if I hold it up to the light, you can see it kind of bled through. I don't know if you can see it very well, but the paint kind of bled through there. And so what I learned is, well, let's kind of seal this up with some dull coat. And I thought, well, that's a good way to seal it up. Well, I also learned, don't spray the darn thing on a dirty paint board, because now I got paint stuck on the back here, so I'm going to have to redo this one again. But the advantage here is the sign itself got a little messed up. This sign got a little messed up. And all I need to do is just reprint this piece. I don't have to redo the whole building. So eventually, when I get this thing right, this little sign will fit in here. It's got some nice translucent property to it. You can see how thin it is. It's not very thick. And I get a light behind there, and it just might be able to make this look like a lighted sign. Other little details, you notice I've got doors here that look like they're kind of going out into the middle of the building here. I've made some little tiny balconies with the printer. Now this is actually 3 pieces. I printed this on the printer with the balcony railing on the flat on the bed, and then the platform was printed vertically. So it was, when it was on the plate, it was printed in this direction, and the end pieces are separate, and those I just glued on. So I'll paint this, and little balconies will be able to fit right on the front of the building like so. So I'll have about 6 little balconies to add some detail to the building. And when I showed you the drawing on the computer, it was designed kind of flat on the table. That's how I draw these things, is just flat on the table. And each of these little details you see, that's how what the boxes look like by the time I get it printed. Even the little detail on the door there you can see is this all little boxes here. And it's a real slick way to print these buildings. So I enjoy doing these. I've got a bunch of backdrop buildings that'll be part of the Union Station project when I get them in there. Sorry, my light is a little orangey here, so it's a little hard to tell. Some of the exposure is kind of weird here, but anyway, these are like some of the things I've been doing with the 3D printer, making these little buildings and the little signs. Again, here I got to redo this sign, but fortunately I don't have to redo the whole building, because the way I designed this to fit right in this little opening of the sign, of the storefront here, and they just fit right in there. And don't know if I can get a good look at it, but you can kind of see it's got a little transparency to it, so it should make a nice little lighted sign. And that's my idea here, to give that sign a little transparency to it. But again, this needs to be redone because the paint kind of seeped in between some of the little areas of the sign. So my next try, I'll print this again and seal it with a little dull coat, and make sure I do it on a clean surface so I don't get any dirty paint on it. And then I should be able to stick that back in there and have a nice little lighted sign behind my storefront. And more work progressed on the streets and the lights around the Union Station, trying to get this thing ready for the convention in May. Here's a quick peek at some of the streets that I was working on. Also, in that month, I visited the Hennepin Overland Railway Historical Society. That was a great little visit here. I took my son there. There he is, my son and his brother. I took them along to view the layout. It's a really nice club layout in South Minneapolis. So it's fun to go through there and see the changes they've been working on. It's a big, nice big layout. Fun place to go. Also, I got a new caboose. And I've been checking out this great little steam locomotive. It's a wonderful little locomotive. It has some good pulling power. It's a great little locomotive. I love it. It makes it all the way around my layout without fail. The only trouble is it doesn't belong to me. I've got to return it to Paul, my friend Paul. So thank you for letting me borrow your little loco. Well, in May came the Thousand Lakes Region convention of the NMRA, and I brought along my model. There were other exhibits there that were just incredible. Look at all these beautiful, beautiful models and displays and that were brought in by all the modelers and participants there. Just incredible work. Good people there to put on a really good convention. Had a wonderful time socializing with everyone. and seeing all the exhibits. This is just incredible. Look at all the detail into this thing. This is just a wonderful little model. Where do you get all this stuff? Beautiful, beautiful model. I thought this was exquisite. Well, after the exhibits were all boxed up, broken down, taken home, there's mine in the back of my car waiting for its bumpy ride home. We came back for awards dinner, and that was a lot of fun. And I was very surprised to the recognition my model received on that show. So I'm very much appreciative of everyone there. That was a rough week, and oh boy, those photos I looked terrible. It was kind of a rough week, and it shows. I lost my mom, my sweet mom, earlier in the week. She died the day after Mother's Day. She was a brilliant, extraordinary woman who raised 6 boys pretty much on her own. I'll miss Mom. She had a long life and had lots of good friends. Here's a little quick picture of Mom trying to recall the name of a football player that she liked very much. Big football fan. Always enjoyed watching the games with her. Mom loved animals and books. She had an incredible number of books. Very bright, educated woman. Here's Mom was a tutor, helping students anywhere from grade school all the way through college level. Well, Mom, you had a long, wonderful life. I thank you for everything you ever did for me. I always told you you're the best mom I ever had. I love you, Mom. I'll miss you. Goodbye, Mums. We'll take it from here.